All right, Shevuos, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsor, our annual Talmud Torah sponsor for Tafshin Pei Hey, the Tilsim Mishpach of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the Shumer Drashos this year as a zechus for Besoros Tovos for all of Am Yisrael. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Iyar Haba Leinu L'Tova, Shmuel Rabin Karab, continuation of the yahrzeit of Shmuel's father, Lipa Ben Yecheskel HaKohen Zichron Levracha, and our week of learning sponsor, Hillary Jacobs in Kent, in memory of her daughter, Shifra Zichron Levracha, Bas Chana Dina. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshama Slav and Aliyah, the families, Ein Nechama, all of those who need a refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shalem Yetz Hashem, bring home all of our hostages, and our holy soldiers should be successful. B'chol Ma'aseh Yedehem. We'll say with that, let us begin. Baruch Hashem, we have a lot to do today. Today's daf is Daf Chaf. But I'm beginning the new parak today. We are picking up on Yotes on Beis 19b. 13 lines down from the top. Right at the two dots. Rabbi Yochanan, we actually began this yesterday, but let's just start here again. For Rabbi Yochanan ad Rabbi Yochanan, for Rabbi Reish Lakish ad Reish Lakish. And let's contrast the two opinions of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. This is how we remember again. We ended off yesterday's daf with Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan said that in this context over here, Asaba, we made Safek Yediyah Ki Yediyah, that possible knowledge is like definitive knowledge. And Reish Lakish ultimately chose to interpret the case as dealing with Rabbi Shmuel, who says that you don't need Yediyah B'tchila. That's what we ended off with yesterday's daf. Now the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan, the Sanya, both say this is a very interesting case. Achol Safek Chelev Vinoda, Safek Chelev Vinoda. So here's the case. I consume Safek Chelev. So for example, there's a piece of meat in front of me. I am not sure, is it Chelev, which is prohibited? Is it Shuman, which is permitted? I consume it. So there's a lapse of awareness. I eat it, right? And then afterwards, I know what I did. I realize what I did. Now, under normal circumstances, what would be the halacha for such a situation like that? You bring what is called an asham talui. Asham is a sin offering. Talui means like possibility. So you bring, again, not a possible sin offering, but a sin offering for a possible infraction. So an asham talui. Now, I'll say, in this case over here, what's unique is you did this twice. You did this twice, or whatever. It could be 3 times, 4 times, whatever it is. So if you look at Rashi just a moment, Rashi says over here, Achal Safek Chelev, Chaticha Safek Chelev is Safek Shuman, and then Vinodalo, La'achar is Man Shu Safek Chelev, V'hariu Ba'asham Talui, V'chazar V'achal Safek Chelev, Vinodalo Shesafek Achal. So you repeat the same process, 2 or more times. Rabbi says, Kishim Shemevi Chatos Achal Echad Ve'echad, Kach maybe Asham Talui Achal Echad Ve'echad. So Rabbi says, okay. The same way that if you go ahead and you commit multiple averos, right? So halacha l'maaseh, you can be chayiv for multiple chatos offerings. So too, if you go ahead and you violate this type of possible prohibition, you can be chayiv multiple asham taluis. Okay, that is Rebbe's position. Rashi says over here, actually, we don't have to get Rashi. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Amru, Mishum, Rabbi Shimon, Eino Mevi, Elam Asham Taloi Echad. So all of these, Rabbi Shimon, Yehuda, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, all said in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that Allah said, no, Asham Taloi is different. Only one Asham Taloi per customer, even though, again, there are multiple potential infractions involved. Shne'emar, Al shigagaso asher shagag. Pasuk says you will bring an asham talui al shigagaso, right, for his accidental avera that he accidentally committed. Hatorah ribsa shgagos harbe va'asham talui echad. So the way it's set up is the Torah goes ahead and highlights shigagos harbe, many potential shkagos, but yet even for many potential shkagos, there's only one asham talui. So I want to point out something very interesting. If you notice, the machlokes is not in the chatos case, right? Everyone agrees that if halacha l'maaseh you committed multiple averos, right? Multiple averos. Now, again, remember, the chap over here is, it's not be'elam echad. Because remember, if you commit multiple averos in one lapse of awareness, especially if it's the same avera, how many times will be chayiv? Only once. The idea is, everyone will agree that if you go ahead and you commit multiple averos, right, but in multiple ha'elamos, multiple lapses, there of course will be chatas liability for each and every one. The question is, in an asham talui case, is there multiple asham talui liability or not? Rebbe says yes, Rashbi says no. Rashbi says no, one asham talui per customer. Rav Reish Lakish says, Kan shana Rebbe yedios sveikos mischalkos lechatos. Here Rebbe is saying that ultimately, again, yedios sveikos, which means possible infractions, right? So multiple possible yedios could generate multiple carbonic liabilities. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, and Rabbi Yochanan says, Kishim shi yedias vadai ba'alma mischalkos lechatos. So Rabbi Yochanan frames it a little bit differently. He says, in the same way that in the world of chatos, definitive knowledge creates multiple, independent carbonic liabilities. Kach yedios safek mischalkos la'ashamos. So too, even Yedios Safek, the knowledge that I possibly violated something, could create multiple Asham Talui obligations. So Mara says, Bishlam ad Rabbi Yochanan lo kasha. So also it seems to contradict their previously espoused positions. So Bishlam ad Rabbi Yochanan lo kasha. So you could say Rabbi Yochanan is not a kasha, it's not a contradiction. Why not? Kan, in the case of Asham Talui, Asu v'lo b'chal haTorah kula asu. So it could very well be that this is a unique halacha by Asham Taloi that doesn't apply by other cases. Hacha udlo ksivi yediyah b'hedya, because it's here in the case of Asham Taloi that there is no yediyah that is mentioned explicitly. Because why? Mi v'ne'elam hu dekasi. Remember again, it's learned out from the phrase of v'ne'elam. It was concealed from him. V'lo b'chal haTorah kula asu. Right? Because the rest of the Torah, all other cases are going to be different. Why? Dichsev Aholda elav. The pasuk explicitly says it became known to him, or it became known to him. Yediya ma'al yasa ba'inan. One requires definitive knowledge. El Reish Lakish, but according to Reish Lakish, Adamokim lok Rabbi Shmuel nuk mak Rabbi. By Reish Lakish, instead of setting it up like Rabbi Shmuel, why not establish it like Rabbi? Hakamashon de Rabbi Shmuel lo ba yediya b'tchila. To highlight the idea that Rabbi Shmuel does not require definitive knowledge on the front end in order to generate liability. So Mara says, okay, so pshita, that's obvious. De lo bai midelo miyasri le kroi. I'm sorry. So again, obviously Rabbi Shmuel doesn't require yediyah b'tchila. We already established that beforehand. To which the Gemara says, what would you have thought? Ki lesle mikrai. Maybe Rabbi Shmuel doesn't learn out the need for yediyah b'tchila from a pasuk, but aval migemara isle. But maybe he has a tradition, right? The Masorah, that you still require yediyah b'tchila. To which the Gemara says, Kamash Malon, no, that Rabbi Shmuel does not require Yediyah B'tchila. Okay, so we'll say, so halacha l'maisav. So halacha l'maisav, by the way, just in this case, just so you know, the way, there's really two takeaways over here. First of all, in yesterday's case, because we never really closed it out, which is this machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish about the case of the Shnei Shevilin, the two different paths. So just understand that Rabbi Yochanan holds Safek Yediyah ki Yediyah, Reish Lakish doesn't. Rambam Paskins like Rabbi Yochanan, that Safek Yediyah is Yediyah. That's why, again, interestingly enough, in the case where I know I go down both paths, even if at the time that I went down the second path, I forgot about the first path, halacha l'maisa, there will be asham talui, well, I should say that's really carbon ola v'yored. There'll be carbon ola v'yored liability, right? Why? Because safek yediyah is ki yediyah. In other words, and to kind of couple that, we require that in order for an asham talui, carbon ola v'yored by tuma, right, that you have yediyah b'tchila. So kind of if we merge these two ideas, so on one hand, you must have yediyah b'tchila. You must have knowledge about the fact that you became tamei, and then a lapse of awareness, and then knowledge again in order to be chayiv a carbon ola v'yored. But again, we merge that concept with Rabbi Yochanan, saying that the definition of definitive knowledge doesn't have to mean that you possessed all the knowledge at all the time. It just means that at some point you realize that now you are actually tamei. So for example, in the case of the two paths, even if you forgot about the first path at the time you were walking the second path, halacha l'maisa, that is still called definitive knowledge as well. So we pass we need yediyah b'tchila, but we also pass like you need Rabbi Yochanan. It happens to be able to say in this case, also the Rambam paskins like Rebbe, namely that one could be chayiv for multiple asham taluis. So in this case, where I ate safek chelev, right? I ate safek chiliv, and then I forgot about it. Then I ate safek chiliv again, right? So I have multiple cases of safek chiliv consumption, not behelam echad, not in one lapse, but over time, halacha l'maisa, one could be chayiv for multiple asham taluis. Okay, good. I'll say hadran alach. Oh, sorry, before I jumped the gun. One more piece that I know, again, was intuitive from the way that we were learning, but I just want to explicitly speak it out. We also paskin, I think I mentioned this yesterday, like Rabbi Shmuel in the Mishnah, right? That there is carbon old. Remember again, we had three machlokes in the Mishnah between Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Shmuel. Kam denominated between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva is that they hold that you're chayiv for helam mikdash, but not for, they hold that you're chayiv for helam tumah, but not for helam mikdash. That you're chayiv a carbon ola v'yoreit if you forget about your tumah, but not if you forget about the mikdash or kodesh. Rabbi Shmuel holds that you're chayiv both for helam tumah and for helam mikdash. We paskin like Rabbi Shmuel. Okay, therefore, again, there is carbon ola v'yorei liability whether you forget about your tumah or whether you forget that you were in the Beis HaMikdash or have consumed kodesh. Incredible. All right, I will say hadran alach. Mazel tov, second parak of Shevuos under our belt. Now we'll say back to Shevuos. So Shevuos Shtayim Shein Arba. We'll say now, Baruch Hashem, this could be an intimidating Mishnah, but Baruch Hashem, we've seen it already so many times, so we're keying in it already. So there are two Shevuos, right? Two paradigmatic Shevuos that in reality yield two more cases. Now we'll say here, the nice part is because this is the primary topic of the Mishnah actually spells everything out for us, which is very exciting. So we'll say, what are the two primary types of Shevuos? Shevuos she'ochel v'shelo ochel. So we'll say, so the Mishnah's understanding over here is that on a mid'oraisa, now again, I mentioned this at the beginning of the Masechet, but let's say it again. The Shevuah that we're dealing with over here is what's called a Shevuas bitui. A Shevuas bitui means a declarative Shevuah. You're making a statement about, in this case, about something that will occur. Definitive statement of something that will occur. So the Gemara now, the Mishnah now says that mid'oraisa, there are two primary cases. What are the two primary cases? Shevuah she'ochel, I swear I will eat. We'll just use the kikarzu. I swear that I will eat this loaf of bread. I swear that I will eat it. And shelo ochel, or I swear that I won't eat it. Okay, now again, what's the common denominator over here? Future-oriented Shevuos. So the Mishnah's understanding, and again, we saw already in the first parak that this in and of itself is subject to some level of dispute. But halacha l'maisa, again, the deoraisa paradigm of Shevuas bitui is future-oriented Shevuos. So those are the two. I swear I will eat the loaf of bread. I swear I won't eat the loaf of bread, which then yields two more Shevuos. Shachalti v'shelo achalti. Past tense. I swear I ate the loaf of bread. I swear I did not eat the loaf of bread. Okay. Shevuos shelo ochal va'achal kol shu chayiv d'Rabbi Akiva. So we'll say, so now let's talk about this. So now we'll say, so this is very important, right? So again, Shevuas bitui, the paradigm mid'oraisa, future-oriented Shevuos too. I will eat, I won't eat, yields two more. Now we'll say, now what exactly those two more? What is that? Like d'Rabbanan, d'oraisa, like what? We'll see. I won't eat, I did eat, or I did not eat. Okay, good. Now the Gemara says, Shachal Shevuos shelo ochal. So let's say I make a biblically paradigmatic oath. I swear I will not eat this loaf of bread. V'achal kol shu, and I eat a little bit of it. So the Gemara says, Chayiv d'Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says you're chayiv. Rabbi Akiva says you're chayiv even for consumption of any small amount of bread. Amru Rabbi Akiva. So the Rabbanan says to Rabbi Akiva, Heicha matzina ba'ochal kol shu chayiv, shezeh chayiv. How can you say, it will say in general, whenever there's an Isra Achila, what's the shir for Isra Achila? What's the shir? A kizayis. Now again, you have exceptions to that rule, like Yom Kippur is a different shir, but Lamais, again, in general, Isuri Achila are a kizayis. So Rabbi Akiva, how can you say that you're chayiv for just nibbling on any, you eat a crumb of the loaf, and you're going to be chayiv? That doesn't make any sense. Rabbi Akiva says, V'chi matzino b'medaber u'mevi karban, shezeh medaber mevi karban. Rabbi Akiva says, well look, this by Shevuah is already a different set of circumstances. Why? Where else do you see a case where one could generate liability simply for speaking? Simply for speaking. If you think about it, by the way, right? A Shevuah, there's no maisa, there's no action. All there is speech. Yet speech, which is not a ma'isa, generates liability. So speech, what do you see from here? You see from here that the halachos of Shevuos are fundamentally different than regular halachos. They're just different. So in the same way that a non-ma'isa of speech could generate liability, so too again, even just eating the smallest amount could generate liability as well. Incredible. Says the Gemara, the Memra. The sha'ochal dachil namashma. Now I will say it's interesting because from the Mishnah, it sounds like if a person says shvua sha'ochal, right? I swear that I'm going to, that sha'ochal means I'm going to eat. I'm going to eat, right? The Gemara says, is that true? Or minhu, the Gemara is the kasha, shvua lo ochal lacha, shvua sha'ochal lacha, lo shvua shalo ochal lacha, aser. You have to say, listen to this brayso. The Gemara says as follows: if I say, look at these phrases. Shvua lo ochal lacha. I swear, right? An oath, lo ochal lacha. I will not eat for you, right? Or yours. Shvua sha'ochal lacha. Shvua, now literally translated, it means I'll eat of yours. Lo shvua shelo ochal lacha. Not a shvua that I won't eat of yours. In all of these cases, it's aser. I will say now, out of all these cases, we're only focused on one. What are we focused on? Shvua sha'ochal lacha. So what do you see from here? That the way we interpret shvua sha'ochal lacha is, I swear, I won't eat of your food. So what do you see from here? That in the context of Shavuos, it sounds like the lashon of ochel doesn't mean to eat. Rather, what does it mean? Not to eat. Not to eat. So that contradicts our Mishnah. Says the Imam Rabbi, no. The olam dachil namashma. No. Really, sha'ochel means I will eat. I will eat. The Gemara says, look. So how do you reconcile our Mishnah with this brayso? Lo kashya kan be misarvin bo le'echol kan top of chaf b'she'in misarvin bo le'echol. To which the Gemara says everything depends on context. The brayso's case is talking about a situation where Ruvain is being pressured to eat. Right? Ruvain is being pressured to eat. Ruvain doesn't want to eat, so he takes a shvua not to eat. Our Mishnah is talking about a case. No one's pressuring anyone to go ahead and eat. Therefore, the Gemara says, "Braysa b'misavin bo lechol." So in the Braysa's case, right? So someone's trying to compel Ruvain to eat. V'ka'amar lo achilna. So we'll say, so now we're going to something very interesting, which is that halacha l'maisa, it could very well be that the interpretation of Shevuos, and by extension Nidarim, could also be based on the context in which they are uttered. So therefore, again, the Gemara says like this: in a case where Ruvain is being pressured to eat, and he says, Shvua sha'ochal, it's clear from the context that he's taking a shvua in order not to eat. So therefore, we interpret his words accordingly. So even though he says shvua sha'ochal, it's clear to us contextually that he does not want to eat, and therefore halacha l'maisa, that's how we interpret his phrase. Ultimately, again, but however, in the Mishnah, where there is no pressure that is being applied, so stam shvua sha'ochal means what? I will eat. I swear that I will eat. Okay, very interesting. Rav Ashi says, Rashi Amar Tani shvua she'i ochal lacha. Rav Ashi says, you're right. The brayso actually has to be amended, and the way that the brayso should be written is shvua she'i ochal lacha. I swear, and she'i means that I will not go ahead and eat of your food. To which the Gemara says, if that's the case, ihachi ma'ila memra. Okay, so if a guy's making a shvua that says shvua she'ochal lacha, obviously he's swearing that he's not going to eat Shimon's food. So what's the chiddush over here? Ma'ila memra. So what would you have thought? Lishna de iskale. You might have thought to say that again. You know, when a person says shvua shelo ochal, so shelo is a fully articulated additional word. So therefore, his intention is completely clear. She'i, right? Shvua, right? Shvua she'i ochalacha. She'i maybe could be interpreted as a slip of the tongue and maybe not intended. Kamash Rolan, the Gemara says, when he says Shi'i, we understand that what he's saying is Shalo. That's another way of saying Shalo. And therefore, Allah Chalamaysa, that is construed as a Shvuah not to go ahead and eat. So I'll say, so again, we'll discuss this in greater depth, because over here, really what it sounds like what the Gemara is fundamentally arguing on is, do we use context to interpret the true meaning of the utterer's Shvuah? Sabaye clearly says yes, and Rav Ashi may disagree on that. So again, we'll see that later on as we progress. For our purposes, the takeaway over here is as follows: that it is interesting to see that there is a tzad to say that sometimes sha'ochal, it's fascinating, sha'ochal can mean I will not eat. Just it could mean that. Now stam, in a stam case, shvuah sha'ochal means I swear I will eat. But interesting to note that perhaps context could have a bearing on the interpretation of the shvuah, and that maybe, given the context, sha'ochal could actually mean I won't eat. Okay, but for our purposes, again, for the Mishnah, shvuah sha'ochal means I swear I will eat. Good, beautiful. Let's go back to Tana Rabbanan. So we'll say, so now, what's really fascinating is we're going to get really into the mechanics of Shevuos. It says Tana Rabbanan, Mifta Shvuah. Now we're going to do something very interesting. We're going to speak about different expressions that could mean a Shvuah. So remember, the classic case, how do you take a Shvuah? Classic case of Shvuah, how do you take a Shvuah? Right? I swear. Shvuah sha'ani ochel. I swear I will eat. Shvuah sha'ani ochel kikarzu. I swear, Shvuah, I swear, I will eat this loaf of bread. Right? Again, using the Mishnah, biblical paradigm is future-oriented Shevuos. Now what the Gemara is entertaining are different expressions that can also mean Shevuah. For example, the Gemara says, Mifta Shevuah. Let's say a person says, Mifta ochel kikarzu. You actually make that expression, Mifta ochel kikarzu. The word Mifta also means Shevuah. Isser, Shevuah. So too, again, the word Isser also means Shevuah. For example, now what it sounds like what the Gemara is saying is, Isser kikar zu. Sounds like what he's saying is, right? So what the Gemara is saying is, I swear I will not eat this loaf. So Mifta is interpreted as, literally, you use the word Mifta instead of Shevuah. You use the word Isser instead of Shevuah. It sounds like these words themselves create a Shevuah. The Gemara says, so Mifta Shevuah, Isser Shevuah, Isser. Now I'll say that. What the Gemara is asking is like this: when you use the word Isser, what type of liability does that actually create? What is that? First of all, take a look at Rashi for just a moment. The Gemara says, "Hachin kamer mifta Shevuah, homer mifta kikar zu alai." By the way, I didn't mention this before. Remember, the shvuah we're talking about over here is the shvuas bitui, right? And the punishment for violation of a shvuas bitui ultimately is a carbon olev yored, right? So now again, we have, good, so fine, carbon olev yored. So the Gemara says as follows. And by the way, just so you understand, this is why also, remember why the Gemara also put together Tumah and Shevuos, same type of carbonic liability, Olev Yored. So the Gemara says as follows. So now the Gemara is asking, when it comes to Isser, so now Mifta, literally again, you say the word Mifta, it's like saying Shevuah. When we say Isser, sounds like Isser is also Shevuah. The Gemara says, well, explain to me, what exactly is the Isser of Isser? How does Isser work? The Gemara says, listen to this. Im ata omer Isser Shevuah chayiv, v'im lav pater. So what does that mean? So it sounds like what it's saying is, if you say Isser Shvuah, so in other words, you have to use that lashon of Isser Shvuah. So Isser Shvuah will create liability, but if you don't use lashon of Isser Shvuah, then that's not a Shvuah, therefore you'll be pater. Im ata omer Isser Shvuah, so Gemara says, really? If you say Isser Shvuah, v'ha'amrit Isser Shvuahu. But that's not what the Brisa just said. Right? Beforehand, we just said, Mifta is Shvuah. Isser is Shvuah. It doesn't say Isser Shvuah. It says Isser by itself. That phrase creates Shvuah liability. So what's going on over here? So we'll say, get ready for this. This is what it means to say, Mifta Shvuah. No. So there's different categories over here. Right? The word Mifta, actually using the word Mifta, and we'll see where that comes from, but the actual word Mifta is the equivalent to saying Shevuah. So halachically, there is no difference in saying Shevuah sha'ani ochal kikar zu, I swear I will eat this loaf of bread, and saying Mifta ani ochal kikar zu, I swear, Mifta, I will eat this loaf of bread, same exact thing. In both of those cases, you are swearing to eat a loaf of bread. Now listen, now watch this. Abai says, however, Isser matvis b'shvuah. Oh, Shabbos said this is very interesting. Isser works a little bit differently. Isser works through a principle of what's called hatfasa. This is very exciting. Hatfasa is the process by which you make something prohibited by linking it to something that is already prohibited. Right? That means to be matfasa means to link something. Look at Rashi just a moment. Isser mitvis b'shvuah. Isser alai kikar zu. So if a person says, literally use that lashon, Isser alai kikar zu, right? What are they saying? So Isser this kikar, what are they saying? Hu kimishin nishpa ala kikar, v'chazar v'amar ala kikar achar harei zeh kizeh shehitvis es hasheni berishon. So we'll say, so the way it works is like this. When a person says Isser kikar zu, essentially what they're doing is, kiviyachol, they're linking the loaf to some already previously established prohibited item. It could be another prohibited loaf, it could be a prohibited something else. But that's the way Isser works. So we'll say, you hear what's happening over here? So as opposed to, on one hand, you have Shevuah and Mifta. What does Shevuah and Mifta do? It creates new prohibition. So Shevuah sha'ani ochal kikar zu, or reality. I swear I will eat this loaf of bread. Mifta ochal kikar zu, so brand new reality created. Isser kikar zu, or Isser alai kikar zu, ultimately goes ahead and says, I'm linking this loaf to a previously established prohibition. That's what Isser does, hatfasa. Again, we're going to delve into this a little bit more. So the Gemara says, so Abai Amar Mifta Shvuah, Isser mitvis b'shvuah. Isser. So now Rashi says, Umahu isuro shel Isser zeh. What is the nature of this Isser? Im ata omer mitvis b'shvuah, kimotzi shvuah mipiv damichayiv, v'im lav pater. So then I will say, then it comes into a fundamental issue, which is, does hatfasa work by shvuah? All right, so there's a lot really being thrown at us at once over here. Does it work to make a shvuah? Does it work to make a shvuah? Or can you generate a shvuah by linking a presently unprohibited item to a previously prohibited item or not? Is that tantamount? Does that work to create shvuah reality or not? So again, halacha l'maaseh, the answer to that question will determine whether or not there's actual liability. Umimai. So okay, so now both say, so now we have our categories. Now that we have them, we're going to go ahead and expound on them. So remember, on one hand, I have shvuah and mifta. Shvuah and mifta themselves are actual expressions of an oath. Actual expressions of an oath. So halacha l'maaseh, again, when you say shvuah, you say mifta, you're creating a new oath, creating a new reality for this object. Isser alai kikar zu is hatfasa. I'm linking this loaf, which is right now unprohibited, to something that is previously prohibited. And again, by linking it to a prohibited item, I'm now generating isser upon this new loaf as well. Okay, now those are our categories. Let's delve into it. Umimai de mifta shvuah. By the way, where do you know that from? How do you know that the lashon of mifta is the actual lashon of shvuah? Dichsev o nefesh kisi shava levatei bisvasayim. Okay, so we'll say now. By the way, the lashon of levatei bitui means articulate or expression. So therefore, you see over here that the word mifta is used in the context of shvuah. Therefore, it is a proper synonym for shvuah itself. Isser nami, but if that's the case, you could say the same thing with isser. Dichsev kol neder v'chol shvuas isser. Again, so isser is also used. So why don't you say the same way that mifta works to create a shvuah? Isser also works to create a shvuah. Ella mimai de isser mitvis b'shvuahu. So the Gemara reverses the question. How do you know that the lashon of isser is lashon of hatfasa? Dichsev o asra isser al nafsha b'shvuah. Because also the pasuk says o asra isra al nafsha b'shvuah. So again, if you look at Rashi says mashma. It's actually right across. O asra isra b'shvuah mashma shasarto v'tafasto b'davar shenishpa alav kvar. So we'll say it's actually interesting. Just from the pasuk itself, O asra isra al nafsha b'shvua. The Gemara says that through an isser, I am through a lashon of isser, I'm creating a prohibition through something that was already previously prohibited. Okay, very interesting. Miftanami haksiv l'chala shayivata adam bishvua. But you can say the same thing by mifta. It says anything that a person will articulate through a shvua. So you can make the same argument. Maybe it's talking about something, linkage to something that was already previously prohibited. Amar Abaye, Mifta shvua mehacha. So Rabbi Abaye says the fact that mifta is an expression of shvua is learned that from here. Tim hayos sihya leish unidareha aleha o mifta sifaseh asher asra al nafsha v'ilu shvua lo ka'amar. So we'll say, what do you see from here in this pasuk? In this pasuk, literally, mifta is used as a synonym for shvua. Better than synonym. It's used as a replacement for the word shvua. Right? It says neder, and remember again, we're going to talk about this more, but neder and shvua are sister concepts, but they are sisters who are nothing alike. Right? They're a little bit alike, right? But sisters, who we know they're related, but very different sisters. Right? So we're going to see that shvua. So what's interesting is it's very common in the Torah, wherever you're mentioning neder, you're also going to mention shvua. What's fascinating about this concept is there's a mention of neder. Clearly, we're going to see the Torah is talking about shvua, but doesn't use the word shvua. Instead, what does it say? Mifta. Mifta. So from here, you see that literally, again, the word mifta is an actual synonym for shvua. So the Gemara says, "B'may asra atzma." So what is the prohibition being created with? B'mifta, ultimately with mifta. So see from here, you see that the word mifta literally works in the same way that the word shvua goes ahead and works. Incredible. Rava Amar, Rava says, the Olam Eimalacha, mitvis b'shvua lav kimoti shvua mipiv kami. Dami. So Rava wants to say like this. In reality, hatfasa does not work by shvua. In other words, if you want to create a shvua, linking a currently permitted item to a previously prohibited item is not going to be enough to create a shvua. Shvua has to be created in a different way. So the Gemara says, what's going on over here? And if you try to do that, it does not create a reality. V'achi kamar mifta shvua. And this is what it means to say at the end of the day, halacha l'maisa, mifta is shvua. Okay? Isser nami shvua. Isser is also a shvua. In other words, I saw again. Now, what Rav is coming along to say that shvua is lashon of shvua, obviously. Mifta is lashon of shvua, and guess what? Isser is also. So what do you see from here? Raging machlokus about how Isser works. Does Isser work through hatfasa? Does lashon of Isser essentially say I'm taking this currently permitted item, linking it to a prohibited item? Is that how Isser works? Or no? Isser is an actual lashon of shvua as well. So the Gemara says, Asrei de Isser, itilu akasav bein neder l'shvua. Okay, so we'll say, now when it comes to the prohibitory nature of Isser, the Torah placed it between neder and shvua. Okay, now what does that mean? Now we'll say, okay, so just hold on to your seats over here because we're about to get like a lot of information. There's a lot that's being thrown at us right now, which is always very exciting because now you're going to have all the information you need to be successful pretty much for the rest of your life, right? In the next 5 minutes, at least when it comes to Shevuos and the Darim, right? Because we're going to see some fundamental Yisodos. And then like we see often, we get a lot of information, don't know what to do with it, but as long as you put it somewhere, we'll be able to access it when we need it. So look at Rashi, go almost right across to the right in Rashi. Isser zeh hitilu akasav. So watch this. Hainu perush te Isser. Isser. Imata Omer, Vahachi Kamar, Isser shel Isser. Again, just understand, Isser shel Isser means when you use the word Isser in the context of making a Shvuah, what type of Isser does that create? This means Isser shel Isser. Shamarti lecha, here we go. Shu Shvuah. Lo kol halashonos shavos bo. The truth is, not all expressions of Isser work the same way. How so? Shariatilu hakasav bein neder l'shvua. Oh, this is very interesting. The word Isser itself appears in the context between neder and shvua. The Gemara says, now what is the difference between a neder and a shvua? So say, oh, it's easy, right? A neder is a vow, a shvuah is an oath. Shkoyach, right? Now, mechanically, or right, mechanistically, what is, hold on for just a second. Im amrisil b'lashon shvuah, kigon iser, shelo ochal kikar zeh, kin lashon hanishba'in omim shelo ochal, af ha-iser shotzio b'lashon zeh, shvuah b'chayiv karban. I'm just going to read one second. Okay, so let me tell you this, something very interesting. And this is perhaps one of the most important statements we're going to make during the entire Masechta. The fundamental distinction between a neder and a shvuah is ultimately, again, a shvuah is ultimately an isser on the chefza. Right? The prohibition of a shvuah devolves upon the object. A neder is an isser gavra. The prohibition of the neder devolves upon the individual. They'll say that distinction is core to everything we are going to learn for the next couple of weeks. So again, that's why if you even see the Lashonos, right? So remember again, the Lashon of a shvuah is shvuah, right? Shvuah she'eni ochal kikar zu. Right? I swear I'm not going to eat this loaf. By neder, you would say, Kikar zu alai. Kikar zu alai. This loaf is prohibited unto me. Now you'll say to yourself, who cares? Like at the end of the day, the loaf is prohibited. We're going to see why it makes tremendous distinctions. But again, just remember that. Shvuah iser chefza, the prohibition devolves upon the object. Neder iser gavra. The shvuah devolves upon the individual. So now watch this. Now the Gemara says, so what's Isser? So we'll say, here's the beauty of Isser. Sounds strange, the beauty of Isser, right? But the beauty of the expression of Isser is, it all depends on how you use it. So now go back to Rashi for just one more moment. Rashi says over here, watch this. See if you use Isser in the lashon of shvuah, kigon, Isser shelo ochal kikar zeh. Right? I say, Isser, I will not eat this kikar. We'll say that's an expression of shvuah. So, Kain lashon hanishbar omim shelo ochal, afa Isser shotzia b'lashon zeh shvuahu v'chayiv karban v'imla. So we'll say, so if you use, literally again, if you use Isser as the lashon of shvuah, so the same way, shvuah shelo ochal kikar zu, instead you say Isser shelo ochal kikar zu, then that's an expression of shvuah. On the other hand, v'imlav elo tzio b'lashon neder, shamar Isser kikar zu alai, shu lashon hanodrim. But if you say again, right, Isser kikar zu alai, Isser this loaf on me, Isser gavra av zenodra patamikar. So we'll say ultimately, and I remember we're going to see violation of a neder does not create liability for carbon olavi, different liability. Violation of a shvuah creates liability ultimately again for carbon olavi yored. So Rabbi says, now watch this. So this is actually quite interesting. So now the Gemara says over here, Rava wants to suggest like this. Shvuah is lashon shvuah. Mifta is lashon shvuah. What's Isser? What's Isser? Not hatfasa. Right? So Rava is dispensing with hatfasa. Rava says that Isser is a bona fide lashon, but Isser is unique. Why? It could be used in either context. You can use to create a lashon of shvuah, or you can use to create shvuah or neder. All depends on how you use it. Incredible. The Gemara says, Heichan hitilu. Where do you see that the Torah places Isser in between neder and shvuah? In base isha nadara o asar Isser al nafsha b'shvuah. Wow, there it is. Rabbi says it's actually talking about the context ultimately again of a woman who makes nedarim or shvuos. And they're literally right in the middle. We have neder, or isar or asra isar al nafsha, and then literally right afterwards shvuah. So from here, Rava says, you see from here, you could use isar either as neder or shvuah. Incredible. Abaye says, no, kimotzi shvuah mi piv dami. Abaye says, ultimately again, the lashon of isar is mamish like a lashon of shvuah. The Rava Amar, love kimoti shvuah mi piv dami. Rava says, no, again, halacha l'maisa. It's not like that. So basically, the Gemara is the kasha. There's very interesting cases over here. So therefore, I will say, what we see, just to understand, everyone seems to be agreeing on shvuah, and everyone agrees on mifta. The machlokes case is by isser. Does isser work? Is isser a function of shvuah that ultimately works through hatfasa? Or isser is a unique verb or a unique lashon that can be either shvuah or neder, depending on how it's used in the statement. Okay, so Mori Zakasha, Meisvei, very interesting case here. Ezu Isra Amr Batorah. What's the case of Isser? What's the case of Isser? Haomer, Hare Alai Shalo Ochal Basar, Vishalo Eshte Yayin, Kiyom Shemeis Bo'avis. Well, so listen to this case. A person says, Reuven says, Hare Alai, right? I hereby take upon myself that I will not eat meat and I will not drink wine. Kiyom shemeis bo aviv, like the day my father died. Kiyom shemeis bo ploni, like the day so and so died. Kiyom shenerag bo Gedalia ben Achikam, like the day that Gedalia ben Achikam, son Gedalia, right? Like the day that Gedalia ben Achikam was assassinated. Kiyom shera Yerushalayim b'chorbana, or like the day that I saw Yerushalayim in a state of destruction. So we'll say in all of these cases, aser, a person has created a binding prohibition upon himself not to eat meat and not to drink wine. Now let's look at Rashi. Rashi says, "Kiyom shemeis bo aviv kisher asarti alai basar biyom shemeis bo abali olam." So we'll say now a little bit of context over here. The Gemara is assuming over here that on the day that Reuven's father died, Reuven took upon himself not to eat meat and not to drink wine. Okay, it's yard site. So he took upon himself, again, not to fast per se, but not to eat meat and not to drink wine. So now what he's saying is, his father died on on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Now it's the 25th day of Iyar, right? So now he's coming along and saying, on the 25th day of Iyar, I hereby prohibited myself upon meat and wine like the day that my father died, right? Or like Tzom Gedalia, or like the day the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, or the day that so what's the halacha? It works, and it creates a prohibition to eat meat and drink wine. Shmuel says, "V'hu shenadar uba me'osayom." This is presupposing that there already was a pre-existing neder. Now, I just want to point out, we've switched a little bit from Shevuos to Nedarim, which is fine, not a big deal for this context. Shmuel says this presupposes that he already had accepted upon himself the prohibition not to eat meat and not to drink wine on any of these pre-existing days. Take a look at Rashi. Shekibel alav kvar neder shlo yochal basar b'yom shemeis bo aviv liolam v'chein yom shemeis bo ploni v'chein yom sheneg bo Gedalia uk'sakadaita. So we'll say. So again, we're assuming that he had already prohibited upon himself his father's yard site, or Ploni's yard site, or the day that Gedalia was killed. Dahainu matfis b'neder. So we'll say. So just to be clear, this is a case of hatfasa. It's a case of hatfasa. So I'm standing on a random Wednesday, and what I'm saying is, I take a neder that meat and wine should be prohibited to me like the day that my father died. And again, presupposing that I already made a neder not to eat, drink wine on the day that my father died, I'm being matfis. I'm connecting today to the yard site day of my father. Finish Rashi. V'katani ezu isra amar b'Torah shu bal yachal dvaro homer harei alai ama matfis b'neder harehu b'lo yachal k'neder atzmo b'de matfis b'neder neder matfis b'shvua shua. So we'll say, what's the point over here? What do you see from here? What do you see from here? That hatfasa works, right? Again, there was a whole machlokes. Does hatfasa work or not? Clearly, from this brisa, what do you see? That hatfasa linkage absolutely works. Linkage works. So again, I will say now, this is by neder, but we assume, remember, that in general, whatever works by neder also works by shvua. So if hatfasa is going to work by neder, it's going to work by a shvua. This supports the idea that hatfasa works, and it's a question against those who say that there is no hatfasa by shvuas and by nedarim. So Bishon la Abaye. So Agisvik says, according to Abaye, Midamatfis beneder, midamatfis beneder neder, matfis b'shua shua. So according to Abai, this works out perfectly. The same way that hatfasa works by nedarim, hatfasa will work out by shvuas as well, right? And ultimately, again, because Abai was the one, remember again, going back, Abai was the one who said that the whole concept of Isser is that Isser is hatfasa. So this works beautifully for Abai, because you see from here that hatfasa works. Ella amud beis, Ella l'Rava kasha. But according to Rava, this is a problem. Right? Why Rabbi said? Because Rabbi said that there was no hatfasa. Rabbi said, well, hatfasa, but here we see clearly there is hatfasa. Rabbi, no. Tarit say mahaki. Here's what I have to say. Ezu iser neder ha'amur batorah. What is the case? What is the biblically paradigmatic case of neder? Ha'omer harei alai shelo ochal basar v'shelo eshte yayin ki yom shemeis bo aviv ki yom shenerag bo ploni. So Rava says like this. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, "Taritz ve'ema kolomar haytana la b'matis b'neder ayri ella be'ikar neder ayri." So it's actually quite interesting. Rava says we're not dealing with hatfasa here. The Brisa is talking about hatfasa. The Brisa is talking about the primary way in which to make a neder. How does this Tana say one should make a neder? So look at Rashi. So Fashmo'inon shinu chay beneder ela imkin pershuhu v'achar kach tlohu b'davar hanider alav kvar k'diyalef leiva azal mikra v'achi kamar. I'm just going to read for 2 lines. Eizehu isur neder aval mat. So listen to this. This is a little bit mind blowing. Rava says no. The Brisa actually means like this. The primary way to make a neder is through linkage. That when a person, in order to create a neder, you have to link the neder to something that is already prohibited. So in other words, how do I make a neder? I hereby make a neder not to eat meat and drink wine, like the day my father died. This is not hatfasa, says Rava. This is how you make a neder. This is how you make a neder. By definition, a neder is only created if there is linkage to something that is already previously prohibited. Quite dramatic. The Gemara is like this. Torah say mahachi. Ezu isur neder. Amar b'Torah. Homer harei alai shelo ochal basar shelo eshtein kiyom shemeis ba'aviv kiyom shenerag ba'ploni. That is the way ultimately again that you make a neder. If that's the case, then how do you do hatfasa? What's hatfasa according to Rava? Look at Rashi. The Gemara says, "Vehechi dami matfis." Look at the last white line. Rashi. Matfis kigon shlo perish harei alai shlo ochal basar shlo eshte yain ela amar harei alai yom zeh kiyom shemeis ba'aviv kiyom sherabas yisham. So I'll say this is get ready for this. Okay, so terrible. So we have a fundamental machlokas in the Darim. So Abaye says the way to make a neder is how do you make a neder? Harei kikar zu alai. Right, Harei kikar zu alai ra'asr. Right, Harei kikar zu asr alai. Right, that's how you make an eder. Then Abaye says also a concept of hatfasa. What's hatfasa? Hatfasa says, today I'm hereby prohibited to drink meat and to eat meat and drink wine, or meat and wine should be upon me today, like the day my father died. So I'm being matfis. I'm connecting today to my father's yard site, and therefore it's prohibited. Rava says no, it's not what it's saying. Rava says in order to make a neder, and we'll see why this is, in order to create a neder is only created if you presently link the neder to something that is already previously prohibited. That's how nedarim work. That's nedarim 101. What's hatfasa? Hatfasa is simpler. Hatfasa says meat and wine today should be like meat and wine on the yard site. It's a shorthand neder. You don't have to say areizu alai. Rather, you just say meat and wine today is like meat and wine in the yard site. That's it. That's hatfasa. It's a shorthand neder that doesn't need a full articulation because it links something that is permitted today to something that was permitted beforehand. That's hatfasa. Wild. Now, both say. Now, so interestingly enough, everyone is agreeing that there is hatfasa. The machlok is the mechanics of hatfasa. What's more dramatic is that Rava says that in order to make a neder from the beginning, you have to link it to something that is already prohibited. The Gemara says, "My taima." What's Rava's logic? Why when making a neder, do you have to link to something that was already previously prohibited? Amar Kra, the pasuk says, "Ish ki yidor neder laHashem," because the pasuk says if a person, it's a double lashon, ki yidor neder laHashem, ad sheyidor bedavar hanadar. Shabbos said this is pretty wild. So Rava says the pasuk itself says it's a double lashon ki yidor neder. When you make a neder, you must link it to something that is already prohibited. Right? The only way to make a neder is to link it to something that's already prohibited beforehand. Credible. Ki yom shemeis ba'aviv pshita. So the Gemara says, now if you're linking to the day that your father died, that's obvious. In other words, that's already prohibited by a neder. The Gemara says, ki yom shenerag bo gidai ben achik. It's strictly. The bigger chiddush is linking it to the day of that Gedalia ben Achikam was assassinated. You would have thought, Kevan dechilo nadar nami aser, since you're going to both say some Gedai is aser even without the koach of a neder, ki neder nami lo havya ale iser, the high lav matfis benederhu. I might have thought that the only way to go ahead and accomplish hatfasa is if you link that which you're presently prohibiting to something that was also prohibited through a neder, but something that was previously prohibited not through a neder, maybe it doesn't work with hatfasa. Kamash malano. Kamash malano said that halacha lemaisa, as long as the item was previously prohibited, it doesn't have to be prohibited through a neder. You can still do hatfas with it. So we'll stop over here for today. So what we end off with, Rabbi say something profound. Everyone is agreeing that halacha lemaisa, both Rava and Abaye are agreeing that halacha lemaisa again that there's the concept of neder and the concept of hatfasa. Abaye's understanding over here, but the mechanics are different. And again, so everyone's agreeing, create a neder, create new neder through hatfasa, linking it to something previously prohibited. The tremendous chiddush over here is that Rav is holding that even to make an initial neder, you must link it to something that is previously prohibited. More mechanics, and ultimately, again, seeing whose framework is correct. Emir Hashem tomorrow. Tremendous. Well, so like I said, a lot of information, a lot of fascinating Yisodos, but now that we have it all, we're going to see how to plug it in as we move forward. Shkoyach. Okay, Chaver Zoom, have a great day, everyone.